In the final saga of Demon Slayer, we would see all who remains of the Demon Slayer court take on Muzan and his upper moons within the depths of the underground Infinity Castle. Here, we would see many of our favorite Demon Slayers give their hearts and souls in multiple battles all throughout this 70 chapter battle climax to the story. In this video, I'll be ranking the contribution of each participant to the entire battle against Muzan and all of his forces, while explaining why they sit in their respective ranks. With that said, since I value the time of both you and I'll cut this intro short and get straight into the video. Something I truly love about this arc is the truth that when you really examine all of these characters and the impact they've had, everybody on the list had pretty good overall performances against Muzan and his subordinates, with Gotoge handling this arc pretty well and allowing everybody to have a pretty good showcase. But, of course, I'm gonna have to start with Genga at the bottom. Genga would enter into the Muzan raid with his first and only battle being against Kokushibo, the Upper Moon 1 and the third strongest character in the series. As the weakest member of the 5 senses, Genga was already put at a huge disadvantage. He would find himself cut in half and stuck on the ground the moment he attacked Kokushibo, being unable to do anything but spectate against this calamity. To be fair to Genga, majority of characters are getting washed by Kokushibo in less than a minute under the same circumstances. Eventually, at the climax of the fight, Genga would find himself to be inspired by Tanjiro's advice of being the weakest person on the battlefield, being the most likely to catch their opponents off guard. So he would use his advice to digest Kokushibo's living blade and absorb its power, using a blood demon art to directly attack Kokushibo and create a tree around his body in order to immobilize him. This would prove to be essential to the victory of his teammates, as it would finally give them an opportunity to behead this monster and bring an end to the Upper Moon 1. Now, despite how bad this looks and Genga being at the bottom of the list and all, please understand that it is of my belief that without a single one of these characters present, Muzan and his forces would have walked everybody down. So he's still pretty essential in the grand scheme of things. Genga immobilizing Kokushibo at the very end of the battle did not only grant the win to Sanemi and the others, but it allowed them to take down Kokushibo with less effort and damage than they normally would have had to withstand. And this allows them to bring their A game to Muzan. Kanao finds herself above Genga on the list, as she was the one to primarily fight against Doma after the sacrifice of Shinobu. Kanao did most of the fighting out of the 3 characters who faced Doma, so I'll give her that, but she didn't contribute much to the battle against Muzan himself. Kanao was also the one to save Tanjiro at the end of the arc by injecting the final dose of anti-demon medicine into Tanjiro. Despite that, she didn't really do much. She did close 2 out of the 3 most important battles in the raids, but that's about it. This isn't a slight on her because she was certainly necessary with her enhanced vision against both Doma and Tanjiro specifically, but she still finds herself around the bottom of the list. She also fought against Muzan, but I don't really mention it because we don't see her fighting him ourselves. Muzan just mentions it in chapter 190 the moment that it's revealed that her, Zenitsu, and Inosuke are all present on the battlefield. After Kanao, we have the first pillar on the list, Kanroji. Kanroji throughout majority of the raid would be stuck in combat with the replacement Upper Moon who controlled the entire Infinity Castle. Despite this, she made up for it by being one of the initial combatants to challenge Muzan, and she would fight him for almost the entire first half of the battle, but she would be knocked out earlier than Giyu and Obanai, despite them starting around the same time. And then she would come back toward the end to stop one of his blades from cutting Tanjiro with nothing but her physical strength. While I do value fighting Muzan above really anything else in the raid, you can't deny the fact that Mitsuri really wasn't as present as the rest of the combatants in the raid, but she was essential in holding off Muzan at the peak of his strength and didn't really contribute much past that. She just went out way too early. Tokito's performance would consist of him being the first challenger of the Upper Moon Kokushibo, but he would fall relatively quickly and be saved by Sanemi and Gyome. After being down for a decent amount of time, he would re-enter the battle and save Sanemi from certain death while doing so, going on to stab his blade inside of Kokushibo and grip it with so much strength that it would turn red and burn him from the inside out, contributing to the defeat of the Upper Moon 1. After this, he would retire from the raid and pass away, so that's about all he did. Tokito places at 9 as well, because while he did hold off the Upper Moon for a little bit, save Sanemi, and be essential to landing the final blow, he didn't even make it to the Muzan fight. Despite this, he sits equal with Kanroji because he still contributed a lot to the success of Sanemi and Gyome when they were fighting the Upper Moon 1. Without him, they probably would have gotten really messed up or maybe even died. He clearly had a big role in the grand scheme of things, but just not as much as those above him. At 8, we have Inosuke Hashibira. Inosuke's list of feats in the Muzan raid would consist of him being integral to the fight against Doma alongside Kanao and his participation against Muzan himself, especially toward the end. In the battle against Doma, he would do a strong amount of damage against the Upper Moon while providing many opportunities for Kanao to land blows herself, defend herself, or even reinforcing her blades with his own so she can land the final blow. When fighting against Muzan, he'd make his entrance at chapter 190 before he's put down by one of Muzan's blood demon arts in the very next chapter, but he would make a return in chapter 197 to battle Muzan once more while everybody else was down. Soon after this, Zenitsu and Tanjiro would join him in the final phase of the battle against Muzan in order to finish him off, as he was essential to this part with the three slayers constantly covering one another from Muzan's attacks and whittling down the last of his strength. Inosuke also played a pretty big role in holding off the possessed Tanjiro, as he was really the only one who could fight at that moment. After Inosuke, our favorite crybaby Zenitsu bolts in at 7. Surprisingly enough, Zenitsu managed to hold his own pretty well throughout the entire Infinity Castle saga, as he begins his run with a one-on-one against the newly transformed Upper Moon 6, Kaigaku, and manages to come out on top completely solo. Granted, it's due to Kaigaku being a brand new demon that Zenitsu was able to win here, as Yushiro states right after their fight that if Kaigaku had even a year to train with his new abilities, he would have washed Zenitsu instantly. Keep in mind that most of these Upper Moons tend to be hundreds of years old, so it makes sense. Despite this, Zenitsu still took a dub against one of Muzan's head honcho solo, and that does have a lot of importance to the overall raid, despite the circumstances. Also, like Inosuke, Zenitsu was pivotal in the final parts against Muzan, as he, Tanjiro, and Inosuke worked together and used everything they had in order to coordinate their attacks and save one another against the exhausted and weakened Muzan while everybody else was down. This was just as important as his accomplishment of taking down one of Muzan's commanders solo. All in all, Zenitsu finds himself at 7 due to similar reasons that Inosuke found himself at 8. But him taking out one of the head honcho solo just gives him the edge, considering the fact that this allowed the Demon Slayer Corp to spread out their forces more on the other demons who needed it more. At 6, we have Tomioka Giyu. Giyu was pivotal to many events in the final saga, the battle against Akaza, the battle against Muzan, and saving Tanjiro at the very end of it all. When battling Akaza, Giyu and Tanjiro were basically side by side and taking turns holding off the Upper Moon, as the other was gaining strength or attempting to figure out a way to defeat him. Eventually, Tanjiro manages to behead Akaza, and the two move on to Muzan. Giyu manages to put up a pretty good performance against Muzan, as he's able to hold his own from the very beginning of the fight, and he puts up a pretty good performance all the way up to where Muzan casts his Nerve Blood Demon art. This is important to note, as Giyu was the only character in the cast to fight the entire first half of the battle with no breaks or temporary retreats. After this, Giyu doesn't really do much up until the final parts of the battle, where Muzan is in the baby demon form and Tanjiro's possessed by the remnants of Muzan. Although he contributed a fair bit, it wasn't as much as some of the other characters in those moments. Giyu finds himself high because he was consistent and reliable throughout majority of the arc in his battles, while contributing massively to the downfall of Upper Moon 3. On top of this, the GOAT came out alive. Can't say that about a lot of your other GOATs. As we enter the top 5 on this list, we're going to begin with Sanemi. If he's this high, you know he put in a lot of work in the final saga, and this applies to everybody above him as well. Sanemi earned his spot on the list through his battles against the two most powerful demons in the series, Upper Moon 1 and Muzan. First, Sanemi enters the battle against Upper Moon 1 after both Genga and Muichiro are put down relatively easily. Unlike the other two, he's able to hold his own for a fair bit before both Gyome show up and Kokushibo decides to try a bit more. Alongside Gyome, the two managed to put up a pretty good fight against the Upper Moon 1, but they did require the help of Muichiro and Genga to gain an edge over their opponent and win. Despite this, both Sanemi and Gyome still did the heavy lifting of the fight. Sanemi proceeds on to the Muzan fight and manages to fight for a good portion of the first half like the other pillars did, while contributing to the final parts of it by attacking the Muzan baby demon thing at the very end. Sanemi finds himself so high because he contributed massively to the defeat of Kokushibo while doing a decent job against Muzan. Defeating Kokushibo is a big deal compared to the other upper moons because he is just as capable of wiping out everybody with not much trouble as Muzan is. Kokushibo was even such a big threat that Kiriya considered sending Giyu and Tanjiro to help Gyome, Sanemi, Muichiro, and Genga just to confirm Kokushibo's defeat. So yeah, defeating Kokushibo is a big deal. Now Iguro finds himself at 4 solely due to his performance against Muzan and Muzan alone. Despite not being present for a majority of the arc, he would be present to face the final boss of the series and put up a crazy stat line while doing so. He would battle Muzan for almost the entire first part, go on to be the first person to manifest the Red Blade while battling Muzan, giving everybody the idea to utilize Red Blades themselves, and then save many other people multiple times during the battle. Even after Muzan uses his Blood Demon art, he is the first one to get up from the attack by a long shot compared to everybody else, and he would still help Tanjiro fight against Muzan while everybody was down for a few chapters. Then finally, he sacrifices himself by throwing himself in front of Muzan while he was trying to eat Tanjiro alive. Iguro was the pillar to contribute the most out of them all to the direct defeat of Muzan himself, and that gets him all the way up here. He constantly and consistently kept Muzan busy with battle and prevented him from escaping over and over for an extended amount of times while saving the other characters quite a few times. Just an insane performance overall from a character who didn't do anything the entire series. At the top 3 we begin with Gyome Himejima. Gyome finds himself up here because he was the primary reason for Kokushibo's defeat and he put in tons of pain against Muzan right after. He's basically Sanemi if Sanemi did more, to be honest, and Gyome was also able to hold off Kokushibo solo while Sanemi and everybody else had a break to recover and get themselves back into the battle. Nobody could take Gyome's place in the battles against Kokushibo and Muzan and survive. He just provided too much firepower and strength to the Demon Slayers. I don't think his spot requires too much explanation. At 2, we've got the hero of the story, Tanjiro. The reason why I placed Tanjiro all the way up here is because, like Himejima, he cannot be replaced by anybody else in the cast of the entire Muzan raid. Firstly, Tanjiro was the only character who could put down Akaza for good, as he is not only the counter to Akaza, but Tanjiro's innate character is what reminded Akaza of his family and prevented him from evolving in strength, forcing him to give up and take himself out. Tanjiro also had a similar effect on Kokushibo, as Kokushibo would see Tanjiro as the physical manifestation of Yoriichi's success and techniques being passed down, while his couldn't be passed down to anybody, proving himself to be a failure. This convinced Kokushibo to let himself finally die, instead of continuing to evolve as he had understood that he went down the wrong path. Tanjiro when fighting Muzan would be able to fight Muzan for longer than anybody else. Although he got knocked out in the beginning phases of the battle, when nobody else could fight, Tanjiro was there, single-handedly holding Muzan off and stalling him out enough for Shinobu and Tamayo's medicine to actually take effect on him, providing everybody with a true opportunity to win. He also prevented Muzan's escape multiple times. The sun-breathing technique of Tanjiro's played a massive role in the battle against Muzan and stalling him out. He's just irreplaceable in the grand scheme of things. Also, holding off Muzan completely alone is extremely important because he was the only thing preventing Muzan from cutting down the entire cast while they were down and knocked out. Finally, at number 1, we have Shinobu. Yes, Shinobu was the first person to get clapped in the raid after a pretty lackluster performance against the Upper Moon too. But there is no denying the fact that she is the primary reason for the defeat of both Muzan and Upper Moon 2 through her poisons. Doma is no Kokushibo, but he's also no slouch. Had Shinobu not been present to do what she did, Muzan would have operated at full power the entire raid, and Doma wouldn't have been able to be put down by Inosuke and Kanao, as she hard carried that fight with her poisoning of Doma. She also crafted the aging part of the poison that nerfed Muzan into the ground. It is impossible to win without her contributions, and she is easily the #1 contributor to the downfall of Muzan in this arc. That poison just did way too much damage to the character. If you thought the list was done, guess what? It isn't. At 0, we have a special bonus pick in the form of Yoriichi. Yoriichi Sugikuni finds himself at 0 due to being the progenitor of all demon slaying arts, forcing Muzan and Kokushibo to fall into PTSD visions repeatedly and allowing Tanjiro to witness and understand the true capabilities of the sun breathing. Despite not being physically present, he was present in every single other way possible. Without Yoriichi's presence in the story, not only would this raid be impossible, but the existence of humanity would be impossible. The man damn near came into the world and said, "Let there be light." With that said, that about covers all of the Demon Slayers, their contributions to the raid against Muzan, and how I would rank them. I want to see how you guys would place the characters because I really think you can make this list in 10 different ways and it'd still be reasonable. So leave a comment if you disagree, agree, or would make any changes. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one. Peace out.